My name's Tim. I'm a musician, a car collector, an automotive journalist, and a lover of all things automotive. I've bought and sold collectible cars for 2 decades, and I hope my experiences and my point of view helps you find the car of your dreams. Oh yeah, today's the day. I've always wanted to drive a Noble M12 GTO, and today is the day that happened. What's it like? Stay tuned. It's pretty refined. You can heel toe it. It's very, very playful on the limit. The back wants to come around. You can see it's very, very twisty. Of all the cottage-built niche manufacturers, Noble stands alone in that the Noble M12 GTO 3R is stunningly beautiful. Ferraris from the 60s have a perfect proportion to them, and this car, much in the way that the 250 LM is just absolutely stunning, this car shares its very interesting proportions with the greats. Cars like that, cars like the Lotus Esprit. I still don't love Ferraris from this era. The F430, the 360, while they have grown on me, and they do look beautiful, they're not as stunningly beautiful as this car. The Noble M12 GTO really has some great things going for it, not least of which is this gorgeous sloping nose. The proportions of the mid-engine design really were groundbreaking. I remember reading in Evo magazine back when this car was launched. Essentially, Lee Noble had really hit the jackpot, and I think that he really did. If you look at the M10, it's not a beautiful car. You look at this car, it has the right mix of round and sharp edges that design language today now emulates. Was this car ahead of its time? Yeah, I think so. Is this a car you should think about collecting? That's what we're going to talk about today. When these cars first came out, I'll admit I was a little bit skeptical. And I think much in the same way that Lotus had a real marketing problem, 1G Racing, and granted I don't know anyone from 1G Racing, but they kind of went after, they targeted enthusiasts. And I think that's great. I mean, this is truly an enthusiast car. But in terms of the sales process, this was, you gotta think, these cars knew at $100,000, $95,000 for this particular spec car, that's a lot of money. And you think what you can get for that, are you gonna be able to get it serviced? You know, here's a car that's designed in the UK, built somewhat in South Africa, shipped to Cincinnati, Ohio, and then these guys, while yes, true enthusiasts, didn't exactly instill confidence that this car was going to be able to be maintained easily. Now, what a lot of people missed is this car essentially has a Mondeo ST drivetrain. This is a 6-speed transaxle fitted with a Quaife differential, and it's nearly bulletproof. Cars like that where you're borrowing parts that are readily available make a car like this actually fairly easy to service. Now, you may have to search out specific parts, cross-reference part numbers, those sorts of things, but at the end of the day, servicing a timing chain on this car is going to be much less headache than it is to do a full major on a Ferrari from the similar era. Contemporary specs on this car are pretty stunning. Think about it. 2,400 pounds, moved by a little more than 350 horsepower. This one came with a build sheet that indicated about 385. That's a lot of power to weight ratio when you consider it against other cars from the era. Think about that. 2,400 pounds. You're talking Lotus Exige Alpha 4C. Very little mass to propel forward. And this car is fitted with the 3-liter twin turbocharged unit. When 1G originally brought these cars out, my biggest concern was every car that they brought to the track looked like it had already done a track day. There were stickers on it, which for me, again, $90,000, $100,000 car, there were some things that didn't quite jive. And of those early cars that I remember being at Mid-Ohio and them bringing to the track day, I remember them smoking a lot. And that was a little bit of an off-putting thing. I've seen this car twice now. Every time, it shocks me how nice, how clean, how smoothly it runs. There's no smoke on startup, there's no smoke on XL, and it strikes me that, again, their marketing department was a miss. Had they gone with a more experienced manufacturer, sell these next to Porsches with the same sort of assurance that you get with a Porsche, some sort of a warranty, and also pre-purchase inspection so the car wasn't smoking when they brought it for your demo. You know, those are the kind of things that little niche manufacturers miss, and that's why it remains a cottage industry. I mean, that's why Lee Noble, though he did do a wonderful design here, it takes a lot to build a lot of cars. Speaking of numbers, there's not a lot of these cars. You're looking at about 220, depending on what source you look at, 220 total cars to the US. How many are left? How many are still available for sale? This one probably will never be for sale. A lovingly maintained car such as this is a true collector's item. So price-wise, where these cars sit is very, very compelling to enthusiasts and collectors alike. And I'm hoping that this video sheds some light on the fact that this is a very usable car. This is a car you can buy, add to your collection, and use. This particular car, the fit and finish is pretty amazing. You would not call this, or not really consider this, a kit car. It looks like a true manufactured car, much in the way that like an Ultima GTR or something like that would. And I talked with the owner, Joe, earlier about changing lights and how some of the things are sort of proprietary to this car, and a little bit on the homemade sort of side of things. But there's some real charm in that. What I found is that in the group of enthusiasts that I now know, everybody that sort of works on cars, owns cars, loves cars, I found that a lot of people have Noble M12s. And I've even found that one of the companies that has worked very closely with me on my Lotus Esprit projects, Southwest Lotus Center, they're located in the southwest of England, and they actually are one of the main places you can take your Noble in the UK to get it worked on. They actually fabricate parts in-house. They do all the service and all that sort of things, and they stock most of the parts you need to sort of maintain these cars. Even though there's very few of these cars made, the people that own these cars are die-hard enthusiasts, really passionate about the cars. I think in terms of longevity, this is going to be a pretty safe car to own in that the ownership profile is pretty fanatical. People that own these cars are very much in love with them, and I think that over the long haul, this is a car that you'll be able to own and drive in perpetuity. Styling-wise, in terms of the overall, the gestalt of the styling of this car, there's so many areas that really work well for me. The scalloping and the sharp edge on this wheel well, the beautiful ductwork right here. There's so many elements that I feel like we're ahead of their time. If you think of racing cars, Le Mans racing and that sort of thing, anytime aero is a factor, this sort of hood duct, you're now starting to see that on like the Pista has that. The new C8R is going to have a very similar setup to this, where it has that sort of airflow. I mean, you're talking 2004, that's pretty stinking amazing. I mean, no other car was that sort of aggressive or forward thinking. And being a niche manufacturer, Noble had the sort of balls to go ahead and do something like that. It is a beautiful design element, and I think it's one that works fantastic, maybe even better today than it did when it was released. Kind of moving back the car, you've got this beautiful cutaway right here that again casts a great shadow on this metallic paint. Definitely something that I think is beautiful. I've seen cars too where they have kind of a bubble out here, and this duct right here that actually cools the turbos on this car. It's a beautiful sculpted area, and I think to cover it or to make it more aggressive, this particular iteration of the car, I just think everything flows and works so nicely. Again, you've got this sharp cut line going back here. They even scallop out for the this taillight lens, and I think it's something that Lee Noble, who had designed a bunch of cars, I think this is the one probably that just works the best. I think it's the most resolved. If you look at this just sharp cut into the intercooler at the back, beautiful beautiful, beautiful design work. And I'm hoping that in this video, you decide, yeah, you know what, I feel comfortable enough to buy a Noble M12, because if you're a car collector or if you're passionate about these cars like me, I think it's one that you're going to be sad that you missed. The Noble M12 GTO is well resolved. I think that's the verdict. The verdict is, this is a very, very well crafted car. It is raw in a way that it's kind of hard for me to quantify. F40 maybe, in a car that is almost, you know, it's devoid of a lot of the insulation between the firewall and the driver that a lot of cars do. Thus, when these turbos spool up, you can really feel the heat build. Now, I kind of like that, and the air conditioning is pretty effective. So it's one of those situations where, is it a big deal? It's something you should be aware of. The other thing that isn't super well resolved, the gate on the shifter, sometimes downshifting from third to second, it's a little nebulous. That could be an adjustment thing. In general, it's very, very well put together. Steering is light, little effort required. You can hear from the pebbles hitting the tub that the compound is enjoyable. The dead pedal is a little bit not quite as substantial for my size of foot. I'd like a little bit more space to the left of the clutch pedal. But I mean, we're splitting hairs. Again, chassis tuning feels great. In terms of power delivery, I think the closest thing that I would compare this car to is a 911 twin turbo, like a 996 era, but tuned. So maybe big X50 package and a little more boost. The engine does run out of steam after about 6,000. That's the only time that you feel the drivetrain being from humble origins. Other than that, it feels pretty pedigreed. The suspension tuning is a revelation. I would say borderline Lotus Exige. I'm not exaggerating, it's that good. And the grip levels are ridiculously high. This is the first time I've driven this car, so I'm not going to, you know, sort of reckless abandon or anything like that, but the car is extremely well thought out, extremely well put together. And I have to say, there's a lot to enjoy about the Noble M12 GTO. It's very boosty. It does not feel fragile. It has not puffed a whiff of smoke, though I suspect maybe a flame or two, which is a-okay. And yeah, it's a very well resolved, wonderful car. Question is, when do you buy in? Is this the bottom of the depreciation curve? I think so. I can't really see them getting any cheaper than they are now. The car is, you know, it is just too much car for it to be worth any less than they are now. Now, I have looked just to kind of see what's out there, and as far as stuff that's for sale, as far as things that are for sale, there's a lot of people speculating right now. A car like this, beautifully unmolested, yeah, I would buy it. Would I buy it over a 360 Modena? Or a 360 Modena, depends on where you're from. It'd be a tough choice. This is probably faster. I'd say 9 times out of 10, this car is faster. Do I buy this over a 911 Turbo? Yeah, probably. For me, I think this is a more enjoyable car. Again, the things that I can compare this to are going to be, it's raw like an F40. It has, you know, similar acceleration characteristics to the Esprit. The Esprit pulls a lot harder on the top end. You can feel that there was a lot more development on the engine, particularly on the 4-cylinder. The V8, you know, feels a little more stout than this. It doesn't feel as boosty because it, quite honestly, isn't as boosty. Those cars are probably pretty similar acceleration time-wise. A stock 4-cylinder, this is probably faster. than that Esprit. A stock 996, this feels faster. Again, turbo, twin turbo, not normally aspirated. But yeah, fantastic car. And we've had a great time all day, and the temperature's never gone above 90°C. The car has run extremely reliably. It's never made any weird noises. I will say the turning circle is Viper style. You're gonna Austin Powers this thing anywhere you're going. But other than that, yeah, the Noble M12 GTO, 100% fantastic car. And that's the review. Only a few hundred people will have the opportunity to own an M12 GTO. During this day of driving, it was an absolute blast to have a car that was so raw, yet so reliable. The thing that I come back to the most with this car is the suspension tuning, that evocative mid-engine design, and rarity. The Noble M12 GTO is truly rare and exceptional, and it could be calling your name.